17 years of mortgage payments, school lunches, and silence, and all it took was a sandwich to end a marriage. My name is Nicholas Thorne. I lived on Chesapeake Harbor Drive in Annapolis, Maryland. It is a good neighborhood, the kind of place where the lawns are manicured to a uniform 2.5 inches, where neighbors wave but don't ask too many questions, and where the local schools are consistently ranked among the best in the state. I drove a 2018 Subaru Outback. Nothing flashy, faded forest green, highly reliable, and equipped to get the kids where they needed to go in the middle of a Maryland winter without a single word of complaint. Which, now that I think about it, described me pretty well too. I worked downtown at a municipal contracting firm off West Street. My title was Senior Project Manager for City Infrastructure, which meant I spent my days overseeing county stormwater systems, road rehabilitation contracts, and municipal water main upgrades. It wasn't glamorous work. There were no corporate retreats, no stock options, and no quarterly bonuses. But it was perfectly stable. I had a rock-solid government pension, premium family health coverage that didn't require copays for basic checkups, and I was home by 5:30 every single evening like clockwork. I chose it deliberately, with a very specific purpose in mind, but we will get to that in due time. My wife, Sabrina, drove a leased 2024 Audi Q8. It was glacier white with a black panoramic glass roof, the kind of high-end vehicle that seemed to announce its presence and its price tag long before it ever pulled into the driveway. We were not the same kind of people anymore. I just hadn't been willing to admit it to myself yet. When Sabrina and I first met, she was 29 years old and absolutely drowning under a mountain of debt. She had over $110 in predatory graduate school loans from her time pursuing a master's in human resources and organizational development. It was the kind of high-interest debt that compounds faster than you can physically draw a breath. She couldn't qualify for a basic apartment lease in her own name because her credit score was ruined, and collection agencies called her phone before her alarm clock even went off in the morning. She was brilliant, highly driven, and completely trapped under the weight of her own choices. I was 32 at the time, pulling serious weight as a senior systems architect at a major cybersecurity infrastructure firm in Baltimore. The hours were brutal. 70 hours a week was an easy week, but my stock options had been quietly compounding in a private portfolio for years, and I knew exactly what they were worth. I loved her, and I wanted to build a life with her that wasn't shadowed by the constant terror of financial ruin. So I made a decision. I liquidated my entire stock portfolio. In one single quiet wire transfer, I wiped her slate completely clean. I handed her the zero-balance confirmation at our wedding reception, folded neatly inside a simple congratulations card. There was no public speech, no grand announcement, and no audience. It was just the two of us for 30 seconds near the coat closet at the reception venue off Roe Boulevard. She read the confirmation number, looked up at me, and cried like I have never seen another human being cry before or since. It was a deep, guttural sob of pure, unadulterated relief. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered, her hands shaking as she held the paper. "I know," I said. "But we are a team now." That was the last time Sabrina Thorne cried in a way that made me feel like a good man. About 8 months after our wedding, my division at the cybersecurity firm got completely cut during a major corporate restructuring. It wasn't unusual for the Baltimore tech sector to experience hiccups like that every few years. But what made the timing incredibly complicated was that we were already under contract on the Chesapeake Harbor house. The bank suddenly restructured the deal, declaring that the mortgage approval, the deed, and the entire financial liability would have to rest solely in my name, based on my credit score, my remaining liquid assets, and my sole signature. Sabrina sat across from me at our temporary kitchen table, tears running down her face as she watched me review the massive stack of paperwork. "You're saving us again," she said softly, reaching out to touch my hand. "We're saving us," I told her. "Sign the paper." She signed her name as a witness, and we moved into the house 3 weeks later. A year after that, when she finally secured her first real corporate recruiting position, a junior talent acquisition specialist at a defense consulting firm in Bethesda, making $55,000 a year. I made the second deliberate choice of my life. Instead of chasing another high-octane, soul-crushing corporate role in Baltimore or Washington that would keep me away from home for 70 hours a week, I took the municipal government job in Annapolis. Stable hours, a present father, and home for dinner every single night. She was debt-free, career mobile, and completely unburdened. I figured we had built something incredibly solid. I figured a lot of things back then. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Get comfortable, because this story is going to take you somewhere. Hit that like button and drop a comment below, letting me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to love it here. And here's what nobody tells you about a slow burn. You don't smell the smoke until the whole room is already on fire. The first 7 years of our marriage were fine, even genuinely good. Our son, Lucas, was born first, a healthy, energetic boy, followed 3 years later by our daughter, Chloe. We lived a quiet, comfortable suburban life. We had neighborly cookouts on the 4th of July, ate tacos at a local family-owned spot on Main Street when Sabrina didn't feel like cooking, and drove up to Deep Creek Lake on long summer weekends with a cooler full of iced tea and juice boxes. I was content. I felt like a provider, a father, and a husband who had made the right sacrifices for his family. But then, Sabrina got promoted to Senior Director of Executive Recruitment. Suddenly, her salary jumped to $160,000 a year, with additional performance-based bonuses that pushed her income even higher. In Annapolis, that is a very comfortable salary, unless you start spending it like you have a multi-million-dollar trust fund backing you up. It started small, with subtle lifestyle shifts. First, she insisted on leasing the Glacier White Audi Q8. Then came the weekly grocery hauls from specialty organic markets, where she would spend $400 on imported French olive oils, artisanal cheeses, and the specific kind of sparkling water that comes in a green glass bottle for $9 a pop. She would buy 3 different varieties of organic honey and tell me that the grocery store brand I picked up was full of microplastics and corn syrup. I would just nod, put the jar back, and let her load the cart. Then came the weekend trips with her high-flying girlfriends to the Hamptons, Charleston, and Scottsdale. Her friends were all corporate lawyers, marketing directors, or financial consultants, and Sabrina felt an intense, burning need to prove that she belonged in their social tax bracket. Her Instagram stories became a constant stream of short, highly edited videos from rooftop restaurants, high-end boutiques, and luxury spas, almost always captioned with the same self-righteous phrase: "She works hard for this lifestyle. She deserves the best." She absolutely did work hard, and I never begrudged her professional success. I just also happened to be the sole reason she had absolutely zero overhead. You see, my entire municipal paycheck, every single dollar of it, was already legally committed before I ever saw it. I paid $3,400 a month on the mortgage. I paid another $6,500 in semi-annual property taxes, along with HOA fees, homeowners insurance, and the premium family health insurance plan that covered all 4 of us without a single day of gap. My paycheck kept the physical roof over our heads and the lights burning. My salary was the quiet, invisible engine that made our daily existence possible. Meanwhile, her monthly take-home pay was pure, unadulterated discretionary cash. Every single cent of it belonged to her, to spend exactly as she pleased. She was living the lifestyle of a high-earning single millionaire, because I was quietly functioning as her entire financial infrastructure. She just stopped noticing it. Or maybe she simply stopped caring. I'm still not entirely sure which of those options is worse. The separate bank accounts came about 3 years into her big promotion. I just think financial independence is incredibly important for a modern, successful woman. She told me one evening, while casually loading the dishwasher. "It's not personal, Nick. It's just how things should be done now. It keeps things clean." "Sure, it's not personal," I agreed quietly, because that is what I did. I kept the peace, I kept the house running, and I told myself she was just going through a temporary phase of professional excitement. What I didn't anticipate was what that physical separation of our money would eventually expose. Once our finances were split on paper, the mathematical reality became impossible to ignore. I had absolutely nothing left at the end of every single month. not because I was being irresponsible or spending money on myself, but because I was single-handedly carrying the weight of our entire household's survival. She had everything left because she was carrying absolutely nothing. It was a Sunday dinner about 2 years ago when my stomach first dropped. Her mother, Beatrice, a retired private school administrator from Potomac, with a notoriously sharp tongue and even sharper opinions, was visiting for the weekend. Beatrice was the kind of woman who judged people entirely by their zip codes, the brands of their watches, and where they spent their winter vacations. To her, my municipal job was an embarrassment, a sign of a man who lacked ambition. She made sure I knew it through 1,000 subtle passive-aggressive remarks. Sabrina's sister, Valerie, was there too, along with her husband, Don. We had ordered some expensive seafood platters from a restaurant down by the harbor. I was in the middle of getting clean plates down from the cabinet when Sabrina said it. She didn't even bother to lower her voice or wait for me to leave the room. Must be nice to have a cozy little 9-to-5 municipal job where you don't actually have to think, she said, letting out a soft, mocking laugh. Must be nice to just coast along and let your wife carry the heavy financial lifting for the entire family. Her mother, Beatrice, laughed quietly into her cloth napkin, nodding in agreement. Well, Sabrina, some men are content with just getting by, Beatrice added, her voice dripping with condensation. It's a good thing you have the drive to compensate for the lack of it in your household. Valerie stared up at the ceiling, looking deeply uncomfortable, while her husband Don took a sudden, intense interest in his water glass. I set the plates down on the table, sat in my designated chair, and passed the basket of warm rolls. I thought about the wire transfer that had cleared her $110,000 debt. I thought about the wedding card folded in her hands. I thought about the kitchen table where she had signed the deed, crying and calling me her savior. I thought about all of it, and I silently passed the bread. That was the night I truly started to understand what kind of structure I had actually built. But the kids, that's the part that still catches me sideways when I let myself think about it. Lucas is 16, tall, fast, and obsessed with lacrosse the way only a kid raised in Maryland can be. Chloe is 13, sharp as a tack, always watching from the sidelines, always calculating, and far more like her mother than either of them would care to admit. I drove them to school every single morning down Route 50, past the shopping mall, all the way to their respective campuses in the Anne Arundel County school system. I made their lunches, I showed up to every single lacrosse game, and I sat through every school orchestra recital. I cooked dinner 4 nights a week, real, homemade food, not expensive food delivery. I made Maryland crab soup on rainy Fridays, slow-cooked pot roast on Sundays, and homemade berry cobbler when I was feeling particularly generous. And somewhere along the way, my own kids started looking at me the exact same way their mother looked at me. They saw a man who drove an old, faded Subaru, a man who came home smelling of damp soil and municipal asphalt, while their mother drove a sleek, white luxury SUV and wore designer clothes. They began to equate value with price tags, and since I didn't have a price tag they respected, I became invisible. I was the guy who fixed the broken light fixtures and took out the trash, while she was the savior who bought them their high-status toys. One evening in September, Lucas came into my home office to ask about joining an elite travel lacrosse program. The tournaments were held across Maryland, Virginia, and the Carolinas, and the total registration and travel fee was $4,500. It was an incredible opportunity for him, with college scouts attending almost every game. I looked at our family calendar. Our semi-annual property tax bill of $6,500 was hitting in exactly 11 days, and it was going to completely wipe out my remaining liquid funds. "Buddy," I said, looking up from my desk and trying to keep my tone calm and reasonable, "I can't write a check for $4,500 this exact week. But sit down with me this weekend, and let's budget it out for next month. I want to make this happen for you, and we will find a way to make it work. I promise." He sighed heavily, dropping his shoulders in disappointment. The specific, dramatic sigh of a teenager who has been pre-taught by his mother where to expect disappointment from his father. He looked at me as if I were personally standing in the way of his entire athletic career. Sabrina walked in from the hallway right at that exact moment, carrying her designer shoulder bag and looking incredibly sleek. She didn't even pause to ask what we were discussing. She reached into her bag, pulled out a heavy black platinum card, and slapped it onto the desk right in front of him. "Here you go, sweetie," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Mommy's got you covered. Go ahead and sign up right now. Don't worry about the cost." She looked directly at our son, not at me. She didn't look at me once, completely erasing my presence from the room. "It's a real shame that only one parent in this house actually cares about your talent and your future," she murmured, loud enough for it to echo in the quiet room. Lucas's face lit up like Christmas morning. He hugged her tightly, grabbed the platinum card, and practically floated out of the room, leaving me sitting there in the silence. I sat at my desk alone, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant sound of neighborhood traffic outside. I told myself it wasn't a permanent pattern. I told myself she was just excited to help her son. I told myself a lot of things in that room, trying to patch over the deep bleeding cracks in my own dignity. I had absolutely no idea what was actually coming. None. I was still making lunches every morning, still paying the mortgage, still driving down Route 50 with 2 kids in the back seat, one of whom had recently asked me to drop him off half a block away from the school gates, so his friends wouldn't see him getting out of a faded, dusty Subaru. I parked exactly where he asked, watched him walk the rest of the way without once looking back, and kept the car in park until he safely turned the corner. I was still the foundation of this family. I just didn't know yet that a foundation can hold a house up for decades and still be the very first thing destroyed when the walls finally come crashing down. That part of the story was coming much sooner than I thought. They say the straw that breaks the camel's back is never really about the straw. It's about every single heavy bale of hay that came before it. It was a Wednesday in November. There was nothing special about it. No anniversary, no lingering argument from the night before, just a regular gray damp, nothing Wednesday in Annapolis. It was the kind of cold, misty autumn day that ends before you even realize it started. I had spent 8 grueling hours managing a county water main replacement project near Parole, dealing with spreadsheets, negotiating with stubborn subcontractors, and standing in the biting, wet wind for an on-site inspection that ran 40 minutes longer than it should have. My lower back was throbbing. My coffee had gone cold by 9 a.m., and I had never gotten around to finding a microwave to reheat it. I came home, kicked off my muddy boots, changed out of my damp work clothes, and walked into the kitchen to make myself a quick sandwich before starting dinner. That was it. That was the whole setup. If you had told me that a simple turkey sandwich was going to be the final domino in my 17-year marriage, I would have laughed in your face. I opened the refrigerator and pulled out the deli turkey, the fresh sourdough bread from the organic market run Sabrina had done on Sunday, and a jar of expensive stone-ground mustard she had bought, because the regular yellow kind was apparently beneath our family's social standing. I set everything on the counter, got a clean plate down from the cabinet, and had the first slice of bread in my hand when she walked in. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood in the kitchen doorway in her tailored gray work blazer, her laptop bag still slung over her shoulder, and watched me. She looked at me the way you watch someone doing something mildly irritating, like humming off key or chewing too loudly. Then she crossed the kitchen. She reached out, took the plate right out of my hand, and set it on the counter behind her. She closed the refrigerator door with her hip and looked me dead in the eyes. "Buy your own food," she said. Her voice was flat, quiet, with no heat in it whatsoever, which was somehow so much worse than if she had been screaming at the top of her lungs. "Stop living off me. I am tired of feeding an anchor." The kitchen was completely silent, except for the low hum of the refrigerator she had just shut. I stood there in my kitchen, in my house, paid for by my mortgage, secured by my premarital assets, and 17 years of my adult life, and I looked at my wife. I thought about the wire transfer. I thought about the wedding card. I thought about the kitchen table where she had signed the deed, crying and calling me her safe harbor. I thought about the $4,500 travel lacrosse fee and the card slapped on the table. I thought about the Sunday seafood dinner, Must be nice to let your wife carry the heavy financial lifting. I thought about Lucas asking me to drop him off half a block from school. I thought about all of it in about 4 seconds flat. Then I said the only thing I trusted myself to say. Understood. I walked to the master bedroom, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of the mattress in the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't punch a wall. I just sat there while something very quiet and very permanent finished breaking inside my chest. I sat there for a long time, watching the headlights of passing cars sweep across the ceiling. When I finally got up, I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. And there is a very significant difference between those two things. Angry people make noise. Done people make moves. I went to my desk, opened my laptop, and started making a list of every asset, every account, and every payment I had made over the last 17 years. The next morning, I was sitting in the office of a family law attorney on West Street before 9 a.m. Her name was Miriam Cole, mid-50s, a former county family court judge, the kind of woman who has heard every single version of every sad story and still manages to look at you like yours actually matters. I walked in with a thick manila folder. Inside was 17 years of meticulous documentation I had quietly assembled over the previous 8 hours. Bank statements, the original wire transfer confirmation from my premarital stock liquidation, the mortgage deed solely in my name, property tax records, insurance premium statements, and health plan enrollment records, showing all 4 of us covered under my municipal government benefits package. It was 17 years of paper that told a very different story than the one being performed on Sabrina's Instagram account. Miriam Cole put on her reading glasses. She didn't speak for several minutes as she flipped through the pages. Then she looked up at me. "Mr. Thorne," she said, "do you understand what you're sitting on here? This is an incredibly unique financial setup." "I'm starting to," I said. She leaned forward and walked me through the legal reality, piece by piece, with the calm efficiency of a specialist diffusing an explosive, because the house was solely in my name and purchased entirely using my premarital assets. It could be cleared for an off-market cash sale to an institutional real estate buyer with a clean 30-day close. The equity would be directed into a locked court escrow account and applied as a legal offset against the marital debt I had absorbed before the wedding, namely, the $110,000 in student loans that had been documented, transferred, and paid in full by Nicholas Thorne before Sabrina ever earned a paycheck as my wife. "That escrow argument is airtight," Miriam said, tapping the wire confirmation with her pen. "This doesn't just disappear in a standard asset split. This has its own legal lane. In my 25 years on the bench, I've rarely seen a premarital asset trail this clean and well documented." Then she asked about the children. I told her about the school runs every morning down Route 50, the homemade lunches, the lacrosse games, the cello recitals, and the half-block drop-offs I had never once complained about. I told her about Sabrina's constant travel schedule, conferences in Chicago, recruiting trips to Dallas, and the 60-plus-hour work weeks she proudly documented on her LinkedIn profile to celebrate her corporate hustle. Miriam made a brief note on her pad. "With your stable schedule versus hers, sole physical custody is highly arguable," she said, "especially given your documented history as the primary caregiver. The court values stability above all else." Then she pulled out a calculator. She entered Sabrina's gross annual income, entered mine, ran the Maryland child support formula, and added the alimony calculation on top of it. She turned the screen toward me. I looked at the number. I kept my face completely neutral, but inside I felt something shift. Not satisfaction exactly, but the specific quiet feeling of a long, painful equation finally balancing out. "That is what she would owe you," Miriam said. "Monthly, starting from court approval. Per month?" I asked. "Per month," she confirmed. I nodded slowly. Closing the folder. "What do you need from me?" "Time," she said, "and patience. Can you keep your behavior at home completely unchanged for the next several weeks? Can you act as if nothing is wrong?" "I've been doing that for 7 years," I said. "A few more weeks won't be a problem." She almost smiled. "Then let's get to work. Here's what nobody tells you about executing a plan like this. The hardest part isn't the legal strategy. The attorneys handle that. The hardest part is going home every single night and acting like absolutely nothing has changed. And I did it. For 5 weeks, I did it without a single crack in my composure. I drove Lucas and Chloe to school every morning down Route 50, taking the exact same route, playing the same music playlist that Lucas always hijacked to play whatever song he was into that week. I made dinner 4 nights out of 7, paid the bills, kept the family health insurance active, and attended every single school function I was invited to. And even a few I wasn't. Chloe had a winter orchestra showcase at her school in Crownsville during the second week of November. She had been practicing a difficult solo piece on her cello, Bach's Cello Suite No. 1, for months. I took a half day off work, arrived early, and found a seat in the third row. I wanted to be right there to support her, but I later realized it was too close when she spotted me from the stage and gave me that look. The one that said, "Dad, please blend into the wall. You're embarrassing me in front of my friends." So I quietly stood up, walked down the aisle, and moved back 4 rows without being asked, hiding behind a tall parent. She played her cello beautifully, her fingers flying over the strings with a precision that made my throat tighten with pride. I clapped louder than anyone else around me when she finished. Afterward, she found me near the exit doors, her friends hovering nearby in that teenage orbit, pretending not to watch her talk to her father. "You didn't have to come," she said, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "I know," I said, smiling gently. "But you were absolutely great, Chloe. Your intonation on the Bach was perfect." "Thanks," she muttered, looking down at her shoes, and then she immediately turned back to her friends without another word. I drove home down Route 50 in the dark, the heater blowing warm air against my face, telling myself she would understand one day. I told myself that enough times that it almost started to work. Lucas's travel lacrosse team had a major tournament the last weekend of November, down at a complex in Salisbury. It was a freezing, windy Saturday morning, and the rain was threatening to turn into sleet. I drove 90 minutes east across the Bay Bridge, sat in the cold aluminum bleachers with a paper cup of terrible gas station coffee, and watched my son play the best game I had seen him play all season. He scored 3 goals, made a brilliant defensive interception, and had the entire sideline cheering. I stood up, spilling half my coffee on my boots, but I didn't care. I was so incredibly proud of him. On the drive home, Lucas sat in the passenger seat with his wireless earbuds in, texting his friends. About 15 minutes into the ride, he pulled one earbud out and looked at his phone. "Mom's going to post the highlights tonight," he said, his voice full of excitement. She wasn't there, I noted quietly, keeping my eyes fixed on the wet highway. Coach recorded it and sent it to her. She always posts when they send her the video. Her followers love it. He shoved the earbud back in. I watched the highway, the dark Maryland pines sliding past in the headlights on both sides of Route 50. I said absolutely nothing, because what was there left to say? Your mother is going to take credit for a game she watched on a phone screen, while your father stood in the freezing wind smelling of stale coffee for 4 hours. I just kept driving. Meanwhile, things were moving with clinical precision on the legal side. By the third week of November, Miriam Cole had secured an emergency pre-filing motion. Because I was running a structural deficit trying to keep our family's heads above water, while Sabrina hoarded her discretionary cash, the court quietly greenlit a conditional off-market sale authorization to a real estate investment group. The cash buyer was locked in, the closing escrow was established, and the petition was signed. The trap was set, sitting in Miriam Cole's office on West Street, waiting for my signal. I found a new apartment during the last week of November, a clean, bright 3-bedroom on Forest Drive, in the same school district, along the same morning commute route, so nothing would be disrupted for the kids' daily lives. It had good natural light, a modern kitchen, and was located in a quiet, tree-lined complex. I put down the security deposit and the first month's rent on a Tuesday. That evening, while Sabrina was on a loud corporate conference call upstairs, I packed the first bag. I did it methodically, quietly, taking only the things that were mine before any of this started. My personal documents, my clothes, and a few old personal items. I staged the bags in the back of the hallway linen closet, hidden behind the winter coats. Standing in that closet with a duffel bag containing my entire life, I felt something I hadn't expected. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't rage. It was relief. The specific, exhausted relief of a man who has finally stopped waiting for someone to remember who he is, and is ready to remind them himself. Sabrina's birthday was December 14th. She had organized the entire party herself. 20 relatives, a fully catered spread, the whole production. Her mother, Beatrice, was flying in from Potomac. Her sister, Valerie, was coming up from southern Maryland, along with aunts, uncles, and cousins. The full assembly gathered to celebrate her latest corporate milestone layered right on top of her birthday. She mentioned it to me twice in passing, both times while staring at her phone screen. I listened, I nodded, and I told her it sounded like a great time. She didn't notice that I meant that for completely different reasons. I had one final thing to prepare. I found a gift box, large, heavy, high-quality presentation, wrapped in deep burgundy paper with a wide white satin ribbon. It was the kind of packaging that signaled real, significant thought had gone into what was inside. What was inside was a legal binder, 3 inches thick. I wrapped it myself at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, while Sabrina was at the mall with Valerie. I creased every single fold, tying the bow twice until it sat perfectly. I set it on the top shelf of the hallway closet, right above my packed bags, and looked at it for a quiet moment. Happy birthday, Sabrina. I want you to understand something before we get to December 14th. I did not do what I did because I was angry. I was far past being angry. I did it because a woman stood in my kitchen, the kitchen of the house I built and carried, and told me to stop living off her. So, I decided to take her completely at her word. What happened next, you're probably not ready for, but it's coming. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for justice. I scheduled mine for a Saturday afternoon in December. December 14th arrived the way all truly significant days do, completely ordinary on the outside. It was a cold, gray Maryland morning, the kind of winter sky that can't decide between heavy clouds and pale sunlight, and ultimately commits to neither. I was up at 6 a.m., made a pot of coffee, and stood at the kitchen window in my bathrobe, looking out at the backyard. I looked at the Japanese maple Sabrina had planted 3 summers ago, the deck I pressure washed every single spring, and the fence I had installed myself over a long, humid July weekend while Lucas handed me screws and asked questions about everything except what I was actually doing. I had built a good life in this house. I just wasn't the one living it anymore. By 10 a.m., Sabrina was already in full production mode. She had hired a high-end catering company out of Baltimore, the kind of staff that arrives in matching black polo shirts and sets up silver chafing dishes with quiet, professional efficiency. The dining room table was extended to its full length. Beautiful flower arrangements sat on the kitchen island, and a custom birthday banner was hung across the back wall that read, "Celebrating Sabrina," in glittering gold script. It told you everything you needed to know about the energy of the afternoon. I helped move furniture when asked, carried folding chairs up from the basement, and smiled at the catering crew. I was just a normal husband at a normal party. Nobody in that house knew this was the last Saturday it would ever be mine. The guests started arriving around 1 p.m. Beatrice came first. Sabrina's mother swept through the front door in a long camel hair coat, like she was hosting the event herself. She kissed her daughter on both cheeks and immediately began a grand tour of the house. A tour she had taken 40 times before. Except this time she was narrating it to Sabrina's Aunt Beverly, like a real estate agent describing her own listing. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths. Look at these vaulted ceilings. My daughter picked out every single fixture in this kitchen herself. She has such exquisite taste. She really made this place what it is. I was standing 8 feet away when she said that, holding a trash bag. I let it go. I was incredibly good at letting things go. I had 17 years of practice. And then Sabrina's sister Valerie arrived with her husband Don. Don was a good guy, the kind of man who finds the nearest other husband at a family gathering and sticks close for sheer survival. He found me within 4 minutes. We stood near the kitchen doorway with our drinks and talked about the Ravens with the focused relief of 2 men who had found safe, neutral ground. By 2 p.m., 20 people filled the house. The noise level climbed. And the catering spread was impressive. A local crab cake station, a raw oyster bar, and a peach bourbon glazed chicken that smelled incredible. Someone had ordered a cake from a specialty bakery in Annapolis that did custom fondant work. It had Sabrina's corporate headshot printed in edible ink right on top of it. A cake with your own face on it. I don't know what you're supposed to say about that. I don't think you say anything at all. Sabrina moved through the crowd the way she always did when the audience was right. Luminous, laughing loudly, touching people's arms when she talked. She was wearing a deep green velvet dress. Her mother followed 3 steps behind her like a hype woman, interjecting superlatives into every conversation Sabrina had. She just closed the largest recruitment contract in the Mid-Atlantic region. Did I tell you she's up for a global VP title? And that Audi Q8 in the driveway? She leased that entirely herself. I watched from the periphery, quiet, patient, a man with absolutely nothing left to prove. Lucas and Chloe were there, orbiting their mother's gravitational pull the way they had been for years. Lucas was on his phone near the dining table, and Chloe was sitting with a cousin her age near the window. Neither of them had said more than 12 words to me all morning, which in the mathematics of my recent life was actually above average. The burgundy gift box was sitting on the hallway console table. I had placed it there at noon, perfectly centered, with the white satin bow facing out. Nobody had asked about it yet. Good things come to those who wait. They sang happy birthday at 3:15 p.m. The catering crew dimmed the kitchen lights, and someone lit the candles. Beatrice stood beside her daughter, with her hand pressed to her chest, looking like she was watching a royal coronation. 20 people crowded into the kitchen and dining room doorway, phones held up high, voices rising. I stood in the very back of the crowd. I sang too, softly. Happy birthday to you? Sabrina closed her eyes while they sang, really leaning into the performance, the slight practiced smile, the tilted chin, the hand over her heart. She had built her entire life around moments like this, being witnessed, being celebrated, being the center of something, I thought. Enjoy this part, Sabrina. This is the last 30 seconds of the life you think you have. The song ended, followed by loud applause. Someone yelled, "Speech! Speech!" She laughed and waved it off with the practiced humility of someone who absolutely wanted to give a speech. I stepped forward. I was holding the burgundy gift box. The room noticed my movement before she did. 20 people tracking the husband who had been practically invisible all afternoon, suddenly moving to the center of the kitchen with a beautifully wrapped box. Don caught my eye from across the room, and something in my expression made him slowly lower his drink. Good instincts. Don. Sabrina turned and saw the box. She looked at her sister, a small, involuntary smirk crossing her face, the kind that bypasses the brain and comes straight from years of conditioned, arrogant expectation. Let's see what he scraped together. She took the box, held it up for the audience for a brief moment, and set it on the kitchen island. She pulled the white satin ribbon, tore the burgundy paper, and lifted the heavy lid. The room was still making small party noises, glasses clinking, someone laughing near the back. But then, for about 3 full seconds, Sabrina just stared at what was inside, processing it. Her brain was doing that thing where it refuses to accept the information her eyes are clearly sending. Then the color left her face. Not gradually, all at once, like someone had pulled a plug. She lifted the top document with 2 fingers, holding it like it might burn her. It was the divorce petition. Below it was the sole custody motion. Below those was a court-ordered emergency mandate granting me exclusive possession of our marital assets for immediate liquidation, alongside a signed intent to close from the institutional cash buyers. It wasn't just an eviction notice. It was a legally binding clock ticking down. And sitting right on top of the financial section, circled in thick red ink by Miriam Cole herself, was the monthly support figure the state of Maryland had calculated based on the dramatic income disparity between Sabrina Thorne and her husband. $2,500 per month, payable by Sabrina, starting this coming Friday. The kitchen went absolutely silent. Then Beatrice looked over her daughter's shoulder, read enough of the document to understand what it was, and the kitchen was silent no longer. Are you kidding me? Beatrice's voice climbed above everything, sharp, shrill, and practiced. the voice of a woman who had been sharpening it specifically for men like me her entire adult life. On her birthday? What is wrong with you, Nicholas? You vindictive, pathetic little man. You would do this here today, in front of her family? You are a coward. You have always been a coward, and this just proves it. I turned and looked directly at Beatrice. Her mouth was open, ready for another round of insults. I gave her a calm, steady look. Beatrice, I said, my voice cutting right through her rising panic. You spent years bragging about how your daughter carried the heavy financial lifting for this family. Well, now she gets to do it. Her first check to me is due this Friday. The color left Beatrice's face so fast she had to reach out and grab the doorframe to steady herself. I turned away from her. She was completely out of ammunition. I looked at my children. Lucas had come in from the dining room when the singing started. He was standing near the doorway, his phone held down at his side, completely still, reading the tense atmosphere of the room with the fast, instinctive processing of an athlete. Chloe was right beside him. Her cousin had disappeared. She was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her 13-year-old face before. Not embarrassment, not pity, but something closer to the very first moment of real understanding. I looked at both of them, and I spoke. I didn't speak loudly. I didn't need to. The room had gone quiet enough that every single word landed exactly where I placed it. For years, you two have been taught to look at me like a loser because I didn't buy your love with flashy toys. What your mother never told you is that before you were born, I emptied my entire life savings to pay off $110,000 of her debt so she could even have the career she's being celebrated for today. I intentionally chose a stable government job with lower pay so I could be the parent who actually raised you. The one who cooked your dinners, drove you to practice, sat in the bleachers in the freezing cold, and showed up to every single milestone, including the ones where you asked me to stand in the back so your friends wouldn't see me. Chloe made a small, involuntary sound. Lucas didn't move, but his jaw tightened in a way that told me the words were landing somewhere deep and real. My salary paid the mortgage that kept this roof over your heads every single month for 17 years, while my bank account ran to zero, and hers ran to organic markets, weekend trips, and an Audi Q8 neither of us needed. I paused, letting the silence sit. Then I turned back to Sabrina. She was gripping the edge of the kitchen island, the legal binder lying open in front of her. She was not crying. She was far past crying. She had arrived somewhere beyond it, that hollow, exposed place where there is absolutely nothing left to perform. 5 weeks ago, right here in this kitchen, I said, a short pause, you took a plate out of my hands and told me to stop living off you. You told me to buy my own food and stop utilizing what was yours. So I did. I took my name off your life. I sold my house. Because it was my house, Sabrina. It was always my house, and the equity is locked in a court escrow account to settle the debt you walked into this marriage with. The debt I cleared so you could have the career you just spent an hour letting your mother brag about. I leaned closer, looking at her pale face. Since your income is so dramatically higher than mine, the family court judge ran the numbers and ordered you to pay me $2,500 a month in combined support starting this Friday. And since I have primary custody, the children are leaving with me right now. The court has ordered the immediate listing and transition of this property. The luxury ride is over, Sabrina. You have until the end of the week to pack whatever fits in your car before the locks are changed. I looked at her one final time. Happy birthday, Sabrina. I turned and walked down the hallway. My 2 duffel bags were in the linen closet, exactly where I had left them, packed, zipped, and ready. I pulled them out, set them by the front door, and put on my coat. The house behind me was in a state of absolute chaos. Beatrice's voice was rising again. Someone was crying, and hushed, urgent conversations were breaking out in every corner of the room like small fires. The catering crew had gone completely still near the chafing dishes, professional enough not to move but human enough to stare. I stood at the front door and waited. 15 seconds. 30 seconds. Then I heard footsteps. Lucas came around the corner first, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He didn't say anything. He looked at me, then at the front door, then back at me, and then he walked over to my side and stood there. Chloe came around the corner 12 seconds later. She had her jacket half on, her arms still finding the sleeve. Her eyes were red, but her chin was held up high. She stopped in front of me. "Dad," she whispered, and then she didn't finish the sentence because she didn't have to. "I know," I said gently. "Come on." I opened the front door, and we walked out into the cold December air. The gray Maryland sky hung low over the manicured lawn, and the perfect street that had watched us come and go for 12 years. I loaded the duffel bags into the back of the Subaru. The kids got into the car without being asked. I closed the trunk, stood beside the car for a quiet moment, and looked back at the house on Chesapeake Harbor Drive one final time. The lights were burning bright inside. Through the kitchen window, I could see movement, shapes, people, the blurred aftermath of 20 relatives trying to process something none of them had come here expecting. I saw Beatrice pacing, Valerie on her phone, and the catering crew beginning to quietly and professionally pack up a party that was already over. And in the center of it all, standing completely still at the kitchen island, was Sabrina. She was alone inside that crowded room, holding a legal binder in a house she had never owned, at a party celebrating a version of her life that had just walked out the front door. I got into the car. Lucas had one earbud in, but I could tell his music wasn't playing. Chloe was staring out the window at the house. Neither of them spoke. I started the engine, backed out of the driveway slowly, and pointed the Subaru north toward Forest Drive, our new apartment, and whatever came next. Halfway down the street, Chloe said quietly, almost to her reflection in the window, "Dad, the lacrosse tournament in Salisbury, were you really there the whole time? Every quarter?" "Every single quarter," I said. She nodded slowly, looking down at her hands. Lucas pulled his earbud out, letting it sit in his lap. Nobody said anything else for a while, and that was perfectly fine. We had time now. I had the stable hours. I had the pension, the health plan, and the predictable schedule. I had a clean 3-bedroom apartment with enough space for both of them. I had primary custody, a court order, and the specific, unshakable peace of a man who stopped waiting for someone to remember who he was, and reminded them himself. We drove north on Route 50, the Maryland pines lining both sides of the highway under the gray sky, which was finally deciding, somewhere over the Severn River, to let a little light break through. I turned the heater up. For the first time in a very long time, everyone in my car was exactly where they were supposed to be. If you enjoyed this story, you already know someone like Nick. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. And if you want to see what happens when Sabrina shows up at that apartment, 6 weeks later trying to negotiate, tell me below. I will see you in the next one.